You've connected to Cisco Unplugged.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 93 of Cisco Unplugged, your show for all things wireless. I'm Dan Klamert, your host, and I'm back here with Al. How are you doing, Al?
Hey Dan, doing well. Doing well. Thanks.
Good.
How
Good
are
to
you
see you.
doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Can't complain. Thank you.
It's ready for
So,
the summer heat to be over, but otherwise doing good.
it's been beautiful actually here. So that's been pretty good. Can't complain.
It's
So,
105 here again today.
oh my gosh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
With the heat humidity, it's like 112 or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's brutal. Well, I can't wait to experience that heat next week in Vegas when
Yeah.
we're all out there.
Yeah, that thing with Vegas is the sun is so strong. It's like you put your arm out the window and you're like, ow, that hurt. It's like
Yeah,
uh,
Vegas in the summer. I don't know about that idea, but it'll
yeah.
be fun.
Yeah. So
It'll
if
be
you're if you're if you're a Cisco customer and you're like, Bueller, where'd all my account team go? It's like we're all off in Vegas for next
yeah,
week. So
exactly. Yep.
having our annual pilgrimage to
Yes.
Las Vegas for sales conference.
Yes. Yep. That's right. All right. Well, this week we're going to be talking about securing your wireless network with WPA3. So I know we've talked about this topic a little bit in the past, and in fact, all the way back to I think episode 4, I was looking this morning, and we thought it was relevant. There's been definite changes, updates, to our documentation, to recommendations, that sort of thing. So we wanted to come back and circle back and revisit that topic. So we've brought a couple of experts back here today to talk about that, and I would like to welcome back to the show Dave Scott and Darshan Patel. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well, doing well. So good to see you back here on Unplugged.
Good
Thank you.
morning, guys. Doing well. Thanks for having us back.
Good morning.
You
Well,
know, Dan,
thanks
I,
for
I think WPA3 reminds me a lot of what we went through with 2.4 gigahertz, right? For
Mhm.
the longest time, people thought, man, you can't turn 2.4 gigahertz off in a public area. It's
Sure.
you're going to drop too many clients. They're just
Yeah.
not. And I think, I mean, up until a few years ago, there were still people that believed that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's still a place for 2.4 gig. Don't get me wrong,
Sure.
but I think WPA3 is kind of following that same trajectory, right?
Yeah.
So when you think of episode 4, there was still a lot of people probably saying, WPA3, yeah, I'm not enough we need
Yep.
client support on that yet. So I
Yep.
think it is evolving and evolving pretty rapidly, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as are the standards. So WPA3 isn't the same as it was when we had that episode in episode 4. So
That's a good point. I
uh,
mean, that's what makes wireless so interesting is how fast it changes, evolves, and continues to evolve. So yeah, we thought it was definitely relevant to bring back here to the forefront and
and
talk about it.
and then as I understand, we're going to have a special guest on at the top of the hour.
Yes.
And
Yes.
my understanding from the special guest is you may have seen him on national TV,
That's true. That is
right?
true. Yep.
Right?
So
Okay. So if you're watching, you wanna watch
stay
till that
tuned.
till the top of the hour because we're gonna have a
People
guest on
just
that.
they just sat up at the edge of their seats now, so they're
Yep,
they
that
got the
has been on
cliffhanger.
national TV. So
Exactly.
more to
Exactly.
that story to come, but you're gonna have to stick around
Exactly.
for that.
All right. Yeah. Before we do get to that, and we're going to talk a little bit about first off, kind of about you know what's changed with WPA3, how the standards evolved, what we should be doing today, and then at the top of the hour, like you said, Al, we'll go to our special guest and we'll talk about kind of real world, like what's going on in the real world and what they're doing. So, anyways, before we do get started, just wanted to remind our viewers and first of all, thank them for tuning in, but also that we are taking questions like usual via Slido. You can see the QR code to join the Slido come up on the screen. And then also below our YouTube channel, the link, the video link, you'll see the Slido link, I should say, to join the Slido where you can submit your questions. We do take those live on the episode, but we are going to go through some slides and stuff in the first half. Doesn't mean like you can't answer or ask questions. We'll be ready to answer those. But if you want to, during the more interactive portion of this episode, the second half too, by any means, at any point, jump in with a question if you've got a question via Slido. That's the way. I will be also monitoring the YouTube chat as well on the side, but preferably Slido is the route to go. And speaking of YouTube, we are live on YouTube. We do record these episodes, and they are out there for, like, I mentioned episode 4, you wanted to go back and check out Tom's hairdo on episode 4. You can do that, or more importantly, maybe learn about how WPA3 has evolved. You can go back there and find that and much more. And if you do go out and subscribe, it's youtube.com/@getunplugged. You'll click the little bell next to subscribe, and you'll be notified when we do go live with new episodes, which is every other week, basically, at this point. And speaking of that, we do have our episode schedule out there on YouTube. It's the first link. You click below our header bar on the channel, and you'll be taken to our schedule page where you can see upcoming episodes, that what's on the docket for the future. So, all right, with that, I think we have covered all the housekeeping or the reminders. So I'd like to, I guess, let's talk and get unplugged here and talk about how we're going to secure our Wi-Fi with WPA3. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks. So that was quite a build-up, Al, for the top of the hour, which means now I've got a captive audience for the next 25 minutes.
I see some guesses.
First.
I see some guesses on a Slido already of who this might be.
Okay. I've only got 4 slides. The intention is not to PowerPoint everyone and with an overdose. Just a quick mental roadmap for the next 20 or so minutes. I've only got 4 slides. This slide 1 is going to be how we got from WEP to WPA3 and why 6 gigahertz changed everything. And then I'm going to get into a couple more slides. One is going to be here's what WPA3 actually changes and why security now affects Wi-Fi 7 capabilities. Here's how you migrate without breaking all the legacy stuff. And then finally, I made a cheat sheet and why the real answer increasingly starts with it depends. So before we talk about migrating from WPA2 to WPA3, I just wanted to level set because there's more than 25 years of Wi-Fi security history just on this one slide. When we started with WEP back in 1997, the name tells you what the goal interim time, and nobody should still be living on the bridge is what I usually say. WPA2 since 2004 ended up being remarkably successful. We've essentially been living in that WPA2 era now for over 20 years. WPA2 is now old enough to purchase alcohol, which is an incredibly long time for a security standard to last. But that longevity is important to this discussion. We all know, and we have personal and pre-shared key and enterprise with .1x and EAP. The problem is that after 2 decades, all that backwards compatibility becomes baggage. We accumulated an enormous installed base of old clients and old authentication methods and old assumptions about what should be supported. So when WPA3 arrived in 2018, it actually has been around since 2018, it wasn't simply WPA2 with a different cipher. In fact, we don't equate WPA3 with GCMP the way it shows in the slide there. That's why I have that little asterisk with the side note. WPA3 is much broader than that. We get SAE replacing traditional PSK authentication for the personal side. We get protected management frames become mandatory. OWE gives us encrypted connectivity for what we traditionally thought of as an open network. And WPA3 Enterprise gives us stronger security options as well. So I tried to capture that in that upper right box. Then when we had the third giant inflection point in the history of Wi-Fi, that's 6 gigahertz. I say it's the third because in the history of Wi-Fi, there have been kind of 3 key revolutions, and you've seen this on past Unplugged episodes. MIMO was the Phi revolution, and then with 11AX, OFDMA was the MAC revolution, and then 6 gigahertz was the regulatory and spectrum revolution. And the opening of 6 gigahertz with Wi-Fi 6E gave the industry an opportunity for a clean slate. So instead of dragging 20 years of legacy security into a brand new spectrum, the industry said, nope, not doing that. No WPA2 or pre-shared key or open auth in 6 gigahertz. Protected management frames is mandatory. And for unauthenticated guest networks, it's still encrypted. And that's where opportunistic wireless encryption, OWE, comes in. That's why I say there in the slide, 6 gigahertz changes everything, or changed everything. WPA3 went from something customers could gradually think about to something that they must address if they're going to take full advantage of it. Can we go back to that first slide just for one more second? I wanted to focus in on something there because with Wi-Fi 7, the relationship between security and capability gets even tighter. The EHT rates and MLO, multi-link operation, introduce security requirements of their own. You can't simply bolt modern Wi-Fi 7 capabilities onto legacy WPA2 config and expect everything to work. And so that's why that saying there, security now gates capability. So that kind of sets up a little bit of the rest of the discussion. We have 22 years and counting of WPA2, and in the security world is somewhere between social security and carbon dating. The legacy clients will certainly linger, and they still are. We all know it. We all still have them. But at the same time, 6 gigahertz and Wi-Fi 7 clients are now flooding in. And so the big question is, how do we get from here to there without breaking everything along the way? And that's what the next 3 slides are about. So my apologies in advance because I made some of these slides. They're not terribly elegant or photographic. They're eye charts.
Hey, Dave, on that
go ahead.
previous slide, you had WPA3.x, and then you had 802.11bt at the very top. Can you kind of walk us through what you're doing there, and then also explain? And we had one of the listeners stole my thunder on this, but I was going to ask you what happened to 802.11bs since we're in BT.
Yeah, we missed it just by a little bit with the naming of the convention. So it would have been funny if PQC, that's the post-quantum crypto standard, 802.11bt in the IEEE, of which some of us on this call are members of that working group. And we were kind of like, darn, we missed it by one letter. 802.11bs would have been funny. But no, thanks for calling that out, Al, because that is easy to miss. An important point, WPA3 itself is not frozen in time in 2018. The Wi-Fi Alliance continues to revise it. Right now it's version 3.4, but it remains simply branded as WPA3. Now looking forward, the 802.11bt working group is now developing the post-quantum security mechanisms for Wi-Fi, like PQC AKM suites, PQC digital signatures, and a post-quantum PAKE, a password authenticated key exchange. Will the Wi-Fi Alliance eventually package that as WPA4? We don't know. Maybe, maybe not. So there are papers out there that are even a few years old from a few years ago talking about WPA4, and here's what's coming in WPA4. Don't assume that WPA4 is simply post-quantum crypto version of Wi-Fi. The IEEE builds the underlying mechanism. Ultimately, the WFA decides what the certification and branding looks like. So that's why I have the question mark there in the slide. But you will already see people casually throwing around the WPA4 terminology, and there are some articles out there. 802.11bt is real. The PQC work is real. In 2026, WPA4 is not currently an announced Wi-Fi Alliance certification. That's how I would term that. So
but
yeah,
you heard it here first. No, just kidding.
So let's jump to that next slide, Darshan, and not any big secrets being revealed here. I think everyone already knows to use 6 gigahertz WPA3 or enhanced open is mandatory. There is no WPA2 option in 6 gigahertz. That is by design. The Wi-Fi Alliance and the regulators, they drew a line in the sand. The new spectrum gets modern security, full stop. WPA2 has been around since 2004. It's an impressive run like we talked about. WPA2 with AES, CCMP is still cryptographically solid. But with pre-shared key, on WPA2, a captured four-way handshake is vulnerable to offline dictionary attacks, and management frames might be unprotected by default. WPA3 addresses both of those directly. And since WPA3 has been required, it has actually been required for Wi-Fi Alliance certification since July of 2020. So the good news there is most modern clients in your environment already support it out of the box. So for most organizations, the barrier isn't client capability. It's configuration based, it's SSID design, and it's that transition planning. So the mapping that we're showing here on the slide from 2 to 3 is pretty straightforward. Open becomes OWE, opportunistic wireless encryption. You have the same guest simplicity and no password, but every session gets its own individually encrypted channel using a Diffie-Hellman exchange. No more passive sniffing on guest networks. Pre-shared key becomes SAE, the simultaneous authentication of equals. That's based on the Dragonfly key exchange. And its big win is that it eliminates the offline dictionary attacks and provides forward secrecy. Even if your passphrase is compromised a year from now, yesterday's captured traffic stays protected is the idea behind that one. And enterprise remains enterprise. It's .1x with EAP and radius. The same infrastructure and tools that you already have, but WPA3 mandates the protected management frames, or PMF, on both the APs and the client. And you'll also see that called MFP, depending on the vendor, same thing. And for high assurance environments, there's an optional 192-bit mode. That's where the GCMP 256 comes in. Now with Wi-Fi 7 and multi-link operation, this whole conversation becomes more urgent. MLO lets a single client communicate across 2.4, 5, and 6. So that's why I have them in the different colors there, simultaneously as one logical association. And it requires a common authentication and key management suite across any and all of the participating links. So Wi-Fi 7 makes this more interesting because EHT data rates and MLO impose additional security requirements. MLO requires compatible security, like we just said, across the participating links, but that does not necessarily mean that the entire SSID has to exclude WPA2 clients. On current Cisco implementations, a transition mode wireless LAN can advertise both legacy WPA2 and modern WPA3 AKMs. So a legacy client can associate using WPA2 and operate normally on 2.4 or 5, while a properly capable Wi-Fi 7 client can negotiate the WPA3 security and that's going to be required for EHT and MLO on that same wireless LAN. And this wasn't always the case when 6 gigahertz first became a thing. So that's why I say again, think of the security requirement as gating the client's Wi-Fi 7 capabilities rather than necessarily gating the entire SSID. It's going to be based on the client's capabilities. So that is something that has changed over time, like I alluded to earlier. At one time, the EHT and MLO was an SSID-wide type of thing, and WPA2 clients simply couldn't join. But now, with newer firmware, we can really think of the security as gating the capabilities available to each client rather than gating the entire WLAN. So they're, in other words, WPA2 clients, this is the joke I always say, WPA2 clients can still come to the party. They just don't get the MLO wristband. So that said, this doesn't mean that you flip a switch and deploy WPA3 in an overnight change window. I know many of us have already lived that. Most environments will continue running WPA2 on 2.4 and 5 for the legacy devices, while introducing WPA3 on 6 gigahertz, maybe even using parallel SSIDs or transition modes. So we'll get into that in just a minute. Before we finish this slide, though, keep in mind that you absolutely can move forward with Wi-Fi 7 AP hardware, even if the environment is not fully WPA3 ready today. Deploying Wi-Fi 7 APs, it doesn't mandate that every WLAN or every client immediately start operating and using 11BE. The security incompatible WLAN configs, they can continue operating using the earlier Wi-Fi modes. On the current Cat 9800 software, wireless LANs that do not meet the Wi-Fi 7 security requirements are going to be automatically downgraded to the 11AX operation. So, but here's the key thing. The exact 6 gigahertz slash 11BE slash MLO behavior, it depends on multiple things. It depends on the AKM suites, the ciphers, the client capabilities, most importantly, the software release is a critical one, and just the general platform implementation. So there's a lot of it depends built into that. The important distinction is that Wi-Fi 7 hardware does not automatically mean that every wireless LAN and client is operating at Wi-Fi 7. So test, always validate the specific AP and controller and firmware release, the security configuration, the client OS, and even driver version is going to make a difference because it can be all over the map. But the direction here is very clear. For over 20 years, we've been hand tightening WPA2, and then 6 gigahertz showed up with a torque wrench and said, we're done debating. So let's jump to the next slide, and we'll get ready to hand this off. So now that we've established why WPA3 matters, I like to talk to this slide and say the practical question is, how do we actually get there without breaking everything? And when 6 gigahertz first arrived on the left side of this slide, in fact, I was chatting with Ian and Al, and we said, maybe we just drop the whole left-hand side of this slide. But I just wanted to leave it in there to make the point, to say that was then and this is now. And when 6 gigahertz first arrived, the guidance was pretty straightforward. If the security differs between the bands, use different SSIDs, right? We've probably all been there at one point in the last few years. Most existing 2.4 and 5 gigahertz deployments were still WPA2, while 6 gigahertz requires the WPA3 or enhanced open. So a lot of organizations simply created parallel SSIDs, one for the legacy bands and another for the dedicated to 6 gigahertz. So that's why I'm showing on the left with the -6 in the naming convention. And functionally that worked. But now we've doubled their SSID count. We've complicated the client config. We've fragmented the roaming scenarios. And SSID sprawl is already a bad thing. So that's where transition mode came in. And that term can be confusing because there's different flavors of transition. At its simplest, we're allowing legacy and modern security mechanisms to coexist while we migrate. Basically, we've got multiple AKMs in the beacons, and the client selects an appropriate one during association. So I sometimes try to use the analogy of a bilingual sign, where most clients will understand one or the other and know exactly what to do. But every once in a while, you find a client driver that sees 2 languages and has an existential crisis and just walks away. But 6 gigahertz gave us that clean slate, or that torque wrench opportunity, with mandatory PMF, mandatory WPA3, no traditional pre-shared key, no traditional open. We finally stopped dragging around 2 decades of legacy security mechanisms into a brand new band in 6 gigahertz. Wi-Fi 7, like I said on that last slide, Wi-Fi 7 makes the security configuration even more important, because now security helps determine what capabilities a particular client can use. And the EHT and MLO in particular have added additional security requirements. But like we mentioned on that previous slide, don't interpret that meaning, that's why I put a strikeout you'll see on the other slide where WPA2, if it's anywhere in the beacon, nobody gets Wi-Fi 7. That's not gated at the entire SSID level anymore. So in 2026, the strategy is simpler. Don't create a bunch of new SSIDs unless you need to. Keep legacy WPA2 clients operating only where necessary. Introduce WPA3 for the capable clients. Use transition mechanisms where they're appropriate and tested. Test. And gradually move the environment toward WPA3 as the legacy client population disappears. The exact implementation, again, depends on whether we're talking enterprise, personal, or guest, and on the controller or in the Meraki dashboard, the software release, but most importantly, the client population. I think that's pretty well done for this slide. But before we transition, I'll go back just for one more minute there, because I know some questions come up here sometimes regarding where I mentioned venue in there, right? Legacy open for the guest piece of it is kept where required. And I just want to unpack that just for a minute. Here we are in 2026. The WPA2 should become the exception rather than the default. So I'll put that out there. I think it's a fair statement. Keep it where you can identify an actual compatibility requirement. And maybe that's a stadium venue where you have a much more highly uncontrolled client population. It could be BYOD, it could be IoT or an OT type of a wireless LAN full of devices with, 10 plus year life cycles. But don't hold every managed corporate laptop and phone back because somebody has, a handful of barcode scanners from 2012. Use the transition mechanisms where they make sense. Isolate your legacy populations where that makes sense and where it's appropriate. And just keep shrinking that WPA2 footprint as those clients disappear. What I always like to say is we're treating WPA2 as technical debt that we're deliberately paying down over time, rather than something we're trying to design new networks around. So that's really kind of the key takeaway for this slide.
Yeah, maybe just double click on your guest just a little bit, because I think so. When we look at kind of what we're doing now in some of the large public venues, it's pretty much OWE only, right? We're not including, because we've in the past we've included two SSIDs. Maybe one is like slow old SSID and the other one is slick new SSID. I don't know, but we generally don't do transition mode because for guests for OWE, because clients just don't get to 6 gigahertz, and that's the whole reason generally why we're doing OWE in the first place, right? And so we don't want to introduce sort of this we've got people in OWE but they can't get to 6 gig. Now we're doing everything just on OWE, right? So that's why I say this is like that 2.4 gigahertz transition, right? For so long we were like, yeah, we got 5 gigahertz, but we can't turn off 2.4. It's like, no, turn it off. I looked at a client list. We did an analysis on the clients in a stadium that we had that were listed out by client type. Less than 1% couldn't support OWE. Now, okay, maybe you didn't upgrade your driver and you're not compatible. That's on you. All right. That's my philosophy. All right. I mean, it's like if you're bringing a 15-year-old device in and, like to my brand new network, it's like, well, maybe it's time for you to upgrade if you want to participate in playing this game, because it just doesn't make sense to make 99% of the people suffer because less than 1% have a certain device, right? And it's the same thing we went through with 2.4 gig.
Yeah. So don't hold them back.
Yeah.
Everybody doesn't have to convert everything to WP3 tomorrow, but let's face it, we will have a mix of devices for a few more years, but we have much better migration tools than we did when 6 gigahertz first appeared in 2021. So yeah, it's going to be a planned migration, not an overnight forklift, but it's a great point, and it also brings up another design philosophy that some customers have adopted for that type of a guest in a stadium type of thing, is to think of your 6 gigahertz as premium seating, right? You don't necessarily give the suites in the front row to everybody who walks through the door. So it can make sense in some cases to keep a legacy or guest devices on 2.4 and 5 and reserve that 6 gigahertz as the clean slate spectrum for the managed modern devices that actually and truly take advantage of it. But still, it's test. The clients have the final say, always. So we're just coming to the top of the hour. Let me just go through this slide quickly. This is another eye chart, granted, I give you that, but let me just explain how to read this table. We want to leave this here on the episode for your reference. And this can and will change over time, and it already has changed. I had to update this slide from when I first threw it together, which was maybe only 7 or 8 months ago, or maybe sometime late last year. Down the left are the different security and band combinations of legacy 2.4 and 5. gigahertz options at the top, your 6 gigahertz clean room models at the bottom. And then across the columns, I'm asking some very specific questions. Is WPA2 allowed? Is legacy pre-shared key AKMs allowed? Are transition mechanisms allowed? Is PMF mandatory? And then most importantly for Wi-Fi 7, what does that security configuration mean for EHT and MLO? And so one important update, that's the strikeout text there. We used to simply narrow this down to if WPA2 appears anywhere in the beacon, Wi-Fi 7 stays in the parking lot. That's memorable, but it's no longer completely accurate. So I just left it there as strikeout text for anyone who may have seen me present this slide before. On the Cisco side, with our current implementation, including iOS XE 17.18, WPA2 and WPA3 can coexist on a wireless LAN while properly capable clients negotiate the security required for Wi-Fi 7. So security still gates capability, absolutely, but think about it at the client and the negotiated AKM level, not simply as WPA2 present or absent, right? So at the top, WP2 only is still legacy. Row 5, that's why I left the numbers in the column. Row 5 is still your 6 gigahertz clean room, so to speak. WPA2 and legacy pre-shared key aren't part of standards compliant 6 gigahertz operation. PMF is mandatory, and WPA3 is the baseline. But there's another correction there from when I last presented this slide. OWE does not automatically mean no Wi-Fi 7. Current Wi-Fi 7 implementations can support EHT and MLO with OWE when the required cipher and security configuration are present. What doesn't work as a Wi-Fi 7 model is OWE transition mode, because that carries the legacy open transition mechanism forward, and we can't have that in 6 gigahertz. And that's really the takeaway for this whole table, is that security still gates capability, but the world is more nuanced. So we can't really just say WP2 equals no Wi-Fi 7. Modern clients, modern AKM suites, PMF, having the correct ciphers, and the software implementation, that all matters, which is exactly why I put that disclaimer at the bottom. This table is the ideal world vendor neutral truth table, at least at this point in time. The other disclaimer I should have put there is that since this will probably, this video may live on YouTube indefinitely, this can and will change over time, probably again. But then there's the standard, the vendor implementation, the software release, and finally, most importantly, whatever the client decides to do that day.
Yeah. I think like just kind of over time, I think there's sort of a decision tree, right? So like if you don't care about security, you're not doing 6 gigahertz, stay with WPA2, fine, whatever. And it's like, you don't care about security, you don't care about 6 gigahertz, stay there. If your objective is to get people on 6 gigahertz, which is that big milestone that Dave, you brought up, then do the WPA3, but only implement the AKMs and the cipher suites that are required for 6E, right? So because that's your most, so the further back you go to the left, the more compatibility you have, right? So that's more compatible than when you start going to Wi-Fi 7 and you offer all, the GCP 256 and all the, all the new cipher suites and that kind of stuff, or the AKMs. So know what you're trying to do. If your objective is Wi-Fi 7, you go all the way to the right. If your objective is, I don't care about security and I'm not using 6 gigahertz, you can go all the way to the left. If you're all about just getting 6 gigahertz online, you're in the middle, right? So there's kind of 3 different tiers of this that you can implement. So.
All right, great. Thanks. And we're just past the top of the hour, so I think we need to hand off, Dan, to Darshan and our special guest.
Yeah. All right. That sounds good.
Yeah, people have been waiting for this. That's right.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. That was great. I appreciate it. So yeah, so if you want to hear more here, maybe you're not convinced yet, we've brought on a special guest here to talk about real world WPA3 results, implementation, learnings, things along those lines. So I'd like to take a moment here to welcome Brett Labertia from Clemson University to the show. Welcome, Brett. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Great. I'm doing great. I'm better now that you're here. Thank you very much for taking time from your vacation to join us for our show. I appreciate your time.
No
Okay,
problem at all.
we're going to have to tell the story about why Brett is nationally televised.
Yeah. Could you introduce yourself a little bit, Brett, and talk about what you do? And
Yeah, sure. I'm Brett Libertia. I'm the wireless and network automation manager for Clemson University. That's my 9 to 5 day job, and then my
Yeah.
side job is running wireless headset communication for the Clemson football team.
Nice.
So that would be the time when I appear on national television is usually when something heavy is flying at me on the sideline.
Nice. Go Tigers. All right.
Yeah, the Tigers.
Uh, so, Brett, we
Darshan,
have been.
I guess, yeah, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So we have been working with Brett in Clemson University for a very long time, and it is always amazing when we have such a great information. Dave and Al talked about it, but what actually happens, right? What happens in a real world? And as we can see that we have Wi-Fi 7, right? And Wi-Fi Alliance introduced which clients that are being supported. That actually makes a big difference around it. And with that being said, we know we can find clients, iPhone 16, 17, Android, Pixel devices, Microsoft Windows 11 devices. All of them have been supporting, and it is listed on Wi-Fi Alliance page as well. And you can see the entire list, right? That is great. But what actually, tell me, Brad, what and why the decision was being made to choose 6 gigahertz, like why you were early adopters of 9136 on C9800 wireless. So what was the reason behind being an early adopter on 6 gigahertz?
Well, for us, it was one, we were doing a massive network refresh and we kind of wanted to secure ourselves for the future. Obviously, anybody who works in Wi-Fi knows that when a new spectrum comes out, that's gonna be it, man. So and the other key driver was density. Like at higher education, we're extremely dense. Like we've got auditoriums with hundreds of students, and then normally when you've got, say 300 students in a class, you can count on a device count of twice that at a minimum. So having those extra channels and the extra airtime and all that was very appealing to us. So we rolled it out pretty quick, but then we were dealing with the kind of the transition mode, like client drivers and compatibility issues. So trying to navigate that was the next challenge.
That's really interesting. So an interesting thing is about we saw that what Wi-Fi 7 capable devices are out there, but how the decision, as Dave said, and Al talked about it, and you believed in it, right? The most important thing to know is what's actually in the network. For example, over here for one of the building, you need to know what total clients are capable. Walk us through that, how you made the decision and what did you look into it, total clients around a building and campus, and how the decision that was being made to choose what would be the right encryption, whether transition mode or moving into WPA3 only for your primary SSID as you roam.
Right. So because I'll preface this with saying that because we do run edge roam, the option to have a completely separate SSID is not permitted. Like whenever you're running edge roam, the name can only be edge roam. You can't do edge roam -6 or something like that, like to be compliant with the federated requirements. So we run into this challenge where we wanted to move to WPA3, but the first question I get asked every time I would bring it up to management was like, well, how is this going to affect our clients? What clients are compatible with WPA3? And there's no test I can run short of just turning it on and seeing who's compatible, So I ran into this challenge of, you start asking your colleagues, other higher ed institutions, what have you guys seen? What devices are supported, and looking at any databases out there for, client drivers or people that have run massive testing on different types of clients. But even that's incomplete data. So what I ended up doing was just kind of tying them together with clients that support 6 gigahertz. So I was like, well, if they support 6 gig, then they have to support WPA3. So I started kind of looking at the data. I used one auditorium in particular that we rolled out 6 gig in very early. It's one of our biggest auditoriums, but I started looking at, how many 6 gig clients am I seeing in this auditorium semester over semester? And what I started noticing was like those clients that were hopping on 6 gig were kind of doubling each semester. Like every time we would come back, you'd see more and more 6 gig clients. And eventually we kind of passed that threshold where I was like, we started getting tickets about like, client connectivity issues in there because we just did not have enough 5 gig channels to even cover it. And part of the problem was that at the time we were running the 9166Ds in there. And it was a balancing act of, how many radios do I flip to 6? How many do I leave on 5? You're trying to give enough coverage in there to support everything. And every semester I was having to flip on more and more 6 gig radios. So eventually it crossed that tipping point where I was like, look, most of the clients in this room support 6 gig. So if I extrapolate that out to the rest of our campus, I think it's a pretty sure bet that if I flip on WPA3, it's going to be supported by the vast majority of our clients. And then I also used the ammunition of, since July of 2020, anything certified by the Wi-Fi Alliance has to support it. So,
Hey, Darshan, I have a quick question.
That helped in the argument as well.
If we can jump back to that one previous slide. Yeah, Brett, on the column out there on the far right, the 690 Wi-Fi 5 and below, this was a snapshot in time at some point. Had you been tracking that number? You kind of saw the history. Was it more or less a 1-for-1 kind of a thing as you started flipping on more of the 6 gigahertz radios, like you mentioned? Where were you in the journey when you were down to about 690?
It was kind of 1-for-1. Like you were seeing clients because those clients were being upgraded, so it's like we were, gosh, maybe 1 or 2 semesters before we finally decided to pull the trigger on it.
Okay. And you were seeing these jumps, each new semester, each semester as it started, you would see a significant difference from the semester before.
Absolutely. It's particularly noticeable. It's kind of funny in a college environment where like after winter break is when you see a lot of them because they all get these gifts, they come back with their smartphones or smart socks, whatever, like they're coming back with all these new devices, and it's a whole new challenges of compatibility.
Yeah, it makes for a
issues.
rough January on campus, right? For IT.
Yeah. So, and we flipped on WPA3 on December 29th of 2025. So it was even more challenging.
Wow.
And over the time, so as we can see over here, the Edge Roam, you were confident enough with the data, along with the guest, which is second of that one, that the data does show that if you move to just 6 gigahertz, I mean, not 6 gigahertz, just WPA3, which is being supported all the way back. If we look back the data for more than 10 years, right? Your primary devices, which are like Apple and Samsung and Windows and Android devices, they are all capable of WPA3 and PMF. So did you take back that data like this one? Hey, provide me Apple devices which are capable of protected management frame first, followed by WPA3. That gave you that confidence to take it to the board and say that, okay, let's go with WPA3 only, and we are confident that most of the devices are we should not have problem. Or did you see any like roaming issues or where you had concerns when you turn it off to just WPA3?
It's kind of the opposite, actually. We saw roaming issues. We saw more roaming issues with transition mode than we did with WPA3 proper because of that, like having to offer those 2 different protocols. Like every time a client would go from 5 to 6, like they'd have to do that hard roam, a full reauth, all that. Like it was a pain. So we would get a lot of tickets where there's a client that's kind of like sitting in an office, say, and they're kind of on the edge of two cells, and they're kind of going between 5 and 6 and all that. And like if they're on like a Zoom call or something like that or a WebEx call, like that, they're gonna notice that roam. Like it's not gonna be a smooth roam. It's because they have to fully disconnect and reconnect. So, and additionally, I had kind of some client devices, mostly smartphones that just wouldn't connect with transition mode. They would connect fine with WPA2, or they would connect fine with WPA3, but transition mode they just refuse. So really, by once I demonstrated that, like showing that hey, if we turn on WPA3 required, it actually fixes a lot of our issues. That transition mode, that the supposed compatibility configuration was causing. So.
And if I remember it correct, it was with the Windows 11 devices where the driver was not being updated right, and that was getting us those transition issue around that time, or maybe some kind of an Android device. But those were just one or two exceptions, like an year or like 18 months back. We still have a lot of other higher eds, other enterprises running transition mode, and that is successful. But the goal is, if you have an option, go with WPA3, but check your environment, check your clients, what you have it, and based on that, going with WPA3, having that AKM works really great. But most of the time, once you turn it on, did you see any kind of a tickets increase, any kind of issues, or that was really very well accepted and the data was telling you, this is amazing?
Yeah, it was really well. It actually probably brought our tickets down. But it was funny because we were like bracing, like, we like briefed our help desk, briefed everybody. We're like, okay, guys, we're flipping it on at this time. Just get ready. You might have a line out the door. I really don't know. There's no way for me to test this other than turning it on. And then we turned it on and everybody's like, did you do it yet? And we're like, yeah, I did it. So, and nothing,
Right.
like, no, we had no tickets,
That's
anything.
awesome.
Like it was very, very smooth transition.
And
So Darshan, go back one slide real quick to the Apple clients, just as an example, right? So if you look at this, even some of the AC clients here are capable of supporting WPA3, right? And some of these they're granted their firmware, dependent and that kind of stuff. So if you go back then the previous slide and you say, okay, pretty much all the AX, certainly all the BE clients, and even some of the AC clients, you're down to just a few percent that don't support WPA3, right? I mean, so you would almost expect that transition goes, I mean, if you just following the math, I would expect when he made that transition, it would go smooth. I mean, of course, the realist in me knows nothing ever goes smooth, but I mean, if you follow the math, you'd say, oh yeah, look at that.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
the number
we should
that stuck
not
out
have
to
a
me
problem here.
oh, sorry, Al. Yeah, the
Yeah,
number
no,
that
go
stuck out
ahead.
to me on that previous, or then that next slide was just, I mean, it's like 10 years, it looked like, that we've had support on Apple clients since 2016, the way, if I'm reading that right. So, yeah, I mean, that's a long time. So if you've got some 10-year-old Apple device, you might have other bigger problems, I guess.
Right.
as long as we have like an enterprise environment or a higher ed or a healthcare environment that we know the devices that are being supported, then of course going with this one is not a difficult thing, going just with WPA3. But Brad, what I'm more interested is like what you have right now on the left is what your existing Azure configuration that you have with WPA3, CCMP28, and AKMs with SHA-256. Will you be, I know that you are adopting to new 9172H Wi-Fi 7 access points into your residential halls. Are you planning to go with GCMP 256 and enabling that one so that those clients that are capable of can get better encryption?
Yes, we are. Yeah. So we'll be flipping that on. As far as I understand, like Wi-Fi 7 requires that the AP advertise that anyway. So I would think any compatibility issues that are going to crop up are going to happen regardless. So it would feel disingenuous if the AP advertised it, but then I didn't actually support it. So, I like to be a man of my word.
Um,
I have a
Another
question
interest.
there, maybe for Darshan or Al or Dave. But when you're looking at the encryption, can you select multiple, and can that be negotiated depending on
Yeah.
the client, or
That's
is
what's
it
advertised in the beacon, and then the client
Okay,
can
yep.
negotiate as
Right,
long as
right.
it's
Yeah,
advertised in the
those are
beacon.
check boxes, not radio buttons, but check boxes.
Yeah,
So
that's what I
they're-
figured,
yeah.
but I just wanted to clarify. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Mhm.
Oh yeah, they're on the right. I see it now. I was looking at the left.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'll say we will be flipping it on, but we will not be flipping off CCMP 128 just yet.
Sure.
We'll offer both of them
course.
when we first roll it out.
Absolutely.
That would break stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
that-
That would break stuff.
Right, and that's where
We'll take
WPA3 is not always WPA3 right? I mean, that's what I was saying
exactly.
earlier. There's the 6E version, if you will, of WPA3, and then there's the Wi-Fi 7 version of WPA3. And what Brett is doing here is exactly what we were talking about a little while ago. He's not as concerned about Wi-Fi 7, it looks, as he is just about compatibility and getting clients on 6 gigahertz, right? That's the focus.
That's absolutely right. So the main important thing is when you will be taking off CCMP 128. Yeah, about 3 to 4 years when we have Wi-Fi 8 and all the other devices are done. So we will be going that sometime. One thing I've also noticed is about the guest wireless, and this is more about just for the reference. We can also configure on a Meraki dashboard with WPA3 only, with configuration over here for .1x, SHA-256. So this is a configuration reference for Meraki dashboard to configure enterprise network or HU-roam.
And
Now,
you notice on that slide, notice that the radio button was set to required as opposed to just enabled for 802.11w for the PMF piece of it, in case that wasn't immediately obvious. That 802.11w line in the middle of the slide, the radio button says required as opposed to enabled or disabled.
Yeah. Now, considering we have guest wireless, right? So I know that currently we are not on that one. And what is your plan to go for the guest wireless? You are running open as of right now, but is that a plan to go with only OWE, since transition mode is not supported or not recommended? We had it initially, but we took it out. So what's the plan for that guest wireless?
That's kind of the next target on the list is well, currently we don't run 6 gigahertz on our guests, so that would be the first step, is enable 6 gig, and then start looking at or transition over to OWE would be the plan there.
That sounds amazing.
And just as sort of, I'm curious, is your thinking you would do one OWE SSID for guest, or are you going to do 2 separate SSIDs for guest? Like an open SSID and an OWE?
Like a legacy open on 2.4 and 5.
Yeah.
That's kind of the discussion we still need to have, but
Okay.
my goal would be to offer a single SSID for OWE,
All right.
unless somebody
Brett for
can convince me
president.
otherwise.
I like your answer.
And data tells us everything, right?
Yeah.
You have the data to prove that, hey, most of our clients, like more than 98% of the clients, are capable of it. So why to go ahead and have another SSID for guest open? We need
A
to
second
be
SSID, my experience, and there are venues, large venues I know that are running it.
Yeah.
That works okay, but the challenge is always, it's all about the name, and then you got people that they see a second one, so they'll join a second one, and they'll think, oh, it's legacy, they're trying to fake me out. There's all sorts of things happen when you start doing those 2 SSIDs. To me, you're just going to open yourself up to a lot more tickets at this point, unless you have a fairly large portion of your clients that can't support it. But the math shows you don't, right? So,
Right.
That's
I'm
right.
sorry, Darshan, go ahead.
No, just for the reference, we can also configure OWE as with WPA3 in our Meraki dashboard. With this, I always wanted to make sure that we cover both of us. I wanted to go in the depth with configuration perspective, but considering time, we took a screenshots and wanted to share. The last and the most important thing with passphrase, right? So that comes around the time where, as long as for a healthcare, right, where you're using voice over Wi-Fi, they have a dedicated wireless SSID for it. And if you know most of the Vocera is an application working on an iPhone are newer, like 10 or better, or 7 or better, which can support WPA3, and you are replacing with the newer devices in other areas, you can basically go with WPA3 only as well with it. But that is about those devices where you know your clients in an environment. But where you don't know, as we talked about, transition mode won't be a bad option. Or if you have an IoT devices. So Brett, tell me about what do you do with an IoT devices in your environment right now, since we have limited options available?
We put them in a segmented network where we don't run WPA3 over there or anything like that, but just a normal WPA2 pre-shared key network, and then we treat them like guests essentially.
Okay.
And
So more like
segment
an
them for the rest of the
MPSK or plan to
Yeah.
use with
Yep.
IPSK with
Yeah,
gateways.
yeah, exactly right. Yep.
Oh.
It's where we put the devices we don't like.
I mean, you still
Sounds
have
like a plan.
IoT devices and stuff like that, the headless devices that, maybe don't support a lot of the newer security policies and that sort of stuff. So,
Right.
So last,
you got
considering we have time, just wanted to go ahead, and this is the last information. Catalyst 9800, we have been supporting GCMP 256 encryption, 17.18.3 and better. We have a 17.18.4 plus AP service pack with Mythos hardened upgrade, and I believe we also have with 17.15, which Brad, you recently upgraded your wireless controller last weekend, and we have that is for WPA3 Enterprise and all other SSIDs. As far as Meraki dashboard is concerned, we would recommend for anything better than MR32.2 or better code version, wherever it's possible for Wi-Fi 7 SSID or 802.11bt. I believe that's all we have as of right now. Thank you, Brett, so much for being part of our episode. It has been great to know real world experience and share with the others.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
we love having celebrities on the show.
Yes.
Known among dozens of people.
Yes. And
Now
thanks
I'm
for
going to be
taking
watching
time.
Clemson games all year just for this. It's like,
Yeah.
that guy.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, thanks for taking time away from your vacation. Appreciate your time, Brett. Great to have you on.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave, as well, and Darshan. Really appreciate all the content you guys put together and for this. So looks like we're good on questions. So just want to thank everyone and remind everyone, if you need to get or want to get a hold of us, you can reach out at getunplugged@cisco.com. You can email us there. You can reach us on X, Twitter at unplugged80211 or on threads at unplugged connectivity. Also, your Cisco account team usually knows how to get a hold of us as well to reach out if you have any questions or want to be on the show or comments about future episodes. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And reminder, we do have our schedule out there on youtube.com/@getunplugged. The first link down shows our future episodes, what we've got on the schedule planned for the future. And we appreciate your time tuning in. While you're out there on YouTube, go out there, subscribe, like, and turn on the notification bell. It helps you see when we release new content. It helps others find the channel, and appreciate your support. So until next time, thanks everyone, and stay connected and unplugged.